Welcome to the ribbon cutting for Northgate Apartments. It's the end of our 2-year renovation here. We have several speakers today, so I'm going to keep my comments very brief. But I want to thank the significant others involved in this project. There are literally, I put it at about 2,000 people to be thanked for the success of Northgate. So for all those I can't cover today, I apologize, but I would just like to mention a few. One is the CEDO office of Burlington. As bureaucracies go, I think they are the most efficient, streamlined, and helpful organization that we've had the pleasure to work with. They've done nothing but pave the way and be very helpful and generous with their time. I'd also like to thank Tom O'Brien and everyone at Northern Architects. I think I've been spoiled for life by working with Tom. Most architects historically are known for giving you the prints and then writing you memos to cover themselves as you try to implement the work. And Tom is just the opposite. He's very dedicated, smart, a lot of fun, and he has spent countless hours here, and so has everyone involved with his firm to help us carry out this work that's so unique around occupied housing. I'd also like to thank Neil Mickenberg of Mickenberg, Dunn, Shirakin, and Dorsch, our attorney for this project. Again, for everybody, I could say for their undying commitment. I mean, everyone's been so committed to making this happen, and he's another one of those people. And collectively, I'd like to thank the residents of Northgate, all the committees involving residents and community members that followed our daily work and made all the decisions along the way. The Northgate Resident Association and Maloney Properties, who's the new managing agent on site, doing an excellent job. And I'd also like to thank Wright & Morrissey and KJ Construction, who are the contractors for Phase 1 and Phase 2 of this work, respectively. We asked both those firms to do something unique, and that is work around about 1,300 people. It hadn't been done before, to the best of our knowledge, and construction firms, understandably, are much more used to new construction and working on their own, just with the crews. And both those companies were very creative and flexible in meeting our needs in working around the residents. And then lastly, I'd like to thank our entire staff of Northgate Housing, Inc., and that includes Brenda Torpy, who is our former director. She's now director of the Burlington Land Trust. Brenda was the driving force behind everything that happened here. She's a woman who will not take no for an answer, and to her credit, and to help us get everything done that we needed to do. Chip Patullo, who's our energy specialist on site, and it's been his task to make our complicated heating systems and thermostats understandable to all the residents, to bring the Burlington Electric Department's Neighbor Save program to Northgate, and to be a troubleshooter for us for all the work associated with the rehab. Andrea Brett, who's our administrative assistant, and Andrea was the front of the fortress. She was the first person contacted for everything, and when she first started, she noted that she didn't like things when they were hectic, and then she came to work for us. So we'd like to thank her for coming a long way. And lastly, the two people who made the rehab possible are Susan Marks and Todd Priso. They had the dubious distinction of being the rehab facilitators. That was their titles for the first and second phase of work, respectively. And their job was to get us into the apartments, to make sure that the residents knew what was going on, to get the residents to carry out all sorts of work to enable us to go in and carry out the construction. And they had to be movers, psychologists, beggars, bankers, you name it. They did a fantastic job, and without them we could not have carried out this work. So I thank all these people, and now I'd like to get to the introductions of some of our speakers. First, I'd like to introduce John Romano, who's the project director for Senator Pat Leahy. Come on up, John.
Thanks, Amy. Good to be here today. On behalf of Pat Leahy, sure. Okay. On behalf of Pat Leahy, I want to say greetings and congratulations. In speaking with him yesterday, he told me to make sure to make 2 points, and really only 2 points. The first is that in his 17 years in the Senate, he's seen a lot of federal project money come and go, not only to Vermont but to a lot of states. But this project, in terms of how it was planned, how it was carried out, especially by the people who live here, rates right up there with among the best he's seen. He can't think of a better use in his 17 years in the Senate of federal dollars for a local community of people put to good work, and we all see the results here today, and it's a happy day. Second, and he thought this from the first time he came here, and I did too, this is particularly impressive because what you have here at Northgate is a large community of people, larger than many Vermont towns, larger than many Vermont villages. I mean, that's one of the things that impresses Leahy. He lives in Middlesex, which is maybe even smaller than the Northgate community here. It is very rare, in his view, for a community of people that big to come together with this kind of foresight, with this kind of planning, putting together the army of friends, supporters, technical workers, to change their living environment, change their lives, and in the case of a lot of individuals here, get more involved in government than they ever have been. To go to bat with congressional delegation more than they ever thought possible, and effectively go to bat with a federal agencies more than they had ever done before to produce results. And a personal note, I personally in Vermont, in one way or another, for the last 15 years have been involved with advocating for, planning, developing and consulting on affordable housing projects, and this is certainly the biggest, and it is certainly one of the very best for a lot of reasons which I won't go into today. But the primary reason is that there's resident involvement here, deep and broad resident involvement here. Nationally, I work in a place every day where there's a fair amount of rhetoric about public-private partnerships. There's a fair amount of rhetoric about tenant involvement and restoring and building affordable housing. There's a fair amount of rhetoric about using federal money effectively, matched by state and local dollars. It all happens here, and on my behalf, and particularly on Senator Leahy's behalf, congratulations, good work, and the best for many years to come.
Thank you, John. Can you all hear me? Play to that? You can? Okay. Thank you, John. And like John Romano and Pat Leahy, Representative Bernie Sanders was also one of the driving forces that really helped represent all of us here at Northgate and lead us to the conclusion of the ownership and renovation. So I'd like to welcome him to say a few words as well.
We're competing with the Air Force, I see. All right. Another federal project. I'm delighted to be here, both as the former mayor of this city and as your congressman. I just want to make a few brief points, political points. You hear on television every day from your national leaders how we've got to get the federal government out of these programs. Well, let's be very clear that not only if the federal government were out of these programs, if we did not have an activist city government that was willing to put together the strongest housing staff in the state of Vermont, we would not have achieved this. And that's an important point to understand. Many of us, and I know those of us who are assembled here, happen to believe that a democratic government with a small d that represents the people is not an evil thing. That's what democracy is about. The people coming together and standing together can make a difference. And in this instance, the difference is that hundreds and hundreds of working families now have decent, affordable housing. And that's because government and the people, in this instance, very motivated, strong people from this community stood together with local government, state government, and federal government, and we made a difference. And for many of us, what that means is that we continue this effort, and we say that we have achieved something tremendous here in Northgate, that we want to continue that effort throughout our state to make sure that all of our people have affordable, decent housing. Now, I remember it wasn't so many years ago that the options that the people here had was you're going to be condoized. Was that right? And you're going to be thrown out. And you came down to City Hall, and you marched, and we stood together, and now you own the place. And it's a far better place than anyone dreamed it could be. So what is the lesson? The lesson is that at a time in our country's history when people are overwhelmed by the problems that the country faces and people are giving up, what you showed here is if you stood together, and there were some very bad days, there were some bleak days, there were some hopeless days, but people stood together. We worked with local government, state government, and federal government. Senator Leahy played a wonderful role, and in fact we achieved it. And what we should learn, the lesson of this, is that if we stand together, we can make our city, our state, and our nation a much better place in which to live. So I congratulate all of you on your efforts. Let's keep going forward. This is not the end. This is the beginning. The next fight, national health care, affordable housing for all people. Let's keep going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernie. I'd like now to introduce Elizabeth Mulliken Drake. Elizabeth, where is Elizabeth? There she is. Elizabeth is an intimate friend of Northgate. She was with Housing Vermont and is now the Commissioner of Housing and Community Affairs, and is here today representing Governor Howard Dean. Elizabeth worked with us to put together the very complicated purchasing of Northgate, and we commend her on her new position, and glad to have you here today.
Great. Well, because of a prior commitment, unfortunately, Governor Dean couldn't come to give you his personal congratulations, but I guess I'll say, fortunately for me, I was the one that was asked to come in his place. And as Amy mentioned, I mean, over the past 3 years, I've been fairly involved with this project. And I guess I would say this celebration is probably one of the highlight that really can show one of the visual accomplishments of this project. I mean, it was a real challenge to take a large, generic apartment complex and really make it more energy efficient, more of a community for the people that live here, and now I think really a part of the city of Burlington. And I think the residents and the city and the state can all look to this project, you know, as an example, and hopefully other people around the country will also look, you know, to the success story here. And thank you.
I'd like to introduce another friend of Northgate, Mayor Peter Clavell.
All right, you did it. It's a remarkable achievement. And it's an amazing collection of folks from the public sector, from the private sector, both profit and non-profit, but to put this deal together. So everyone here, I can't acknowledge all of you, but give yourself a pat in the back. But I do want to make just 2 points that struck me in terms of this project. One is the tenacity of the tenants. At a time when it appeared that you'd lose the roof over your head, you hung in there, you had faith, and not only is that roof over your head, but it's an improved roof, it doesn't leak anymore, and you control the housing that you live in, and it's going to be affordable for now and forever. That's a remarkable achievement. The other thing that strikes me about this project is the role that the women of this community have taken in this project. If you look around at the folks that have made this happen, it's the woman in the management team, it's the females, heads of household, the mothers that head the families, many of the families that live in this development, and it's a construction crew, more than 20% of which were women that built this project and rehabilitated it. So I think it's a remarkable achievement, and that by itself is a model which hopefully we will continue to emulate. So I just want to say thank all of you, and everyone here deserves an incredible amount of credit for this accomplishment. It's a remarkable achievement. Thank you.
I'd like to elaborate on that theme a little bit. I think it's hard to impress upon, well, maybe not some of you because you all know the project intimately as well, but it's hard to impress upon most people the challenges that we undertook here at Northgate. And I'm convinced that if we had had any lesser people than the group that we assembled, the kind of challenges we took on would have resulted in things being divisive. Instead, with the kind of people we had, it drew everyone together and made it not only a work accomplishment, but a social and personal growth experience for everybody. And key among the superlative people is Brenda Torpy. So I'd like to introduce Brenda.
It's kind of a very happy day, but it's also almost a sad day, like when you leave school and you can't believe you made it, and you also can't believe it's over. One of the things that I got to do in my job with Northgate was to go and speak to other people in the country who were trying to do this, and to speak to all the people who called us up who were trying to do this, all the people who faced the loss of their homes, as did the people here. And when I tell them the story, well, this is what we did from beginning to end. There's two things that amaze them, and I think two things, and they're two things that are important to highlight today. And the first is that they can't believe that we did $20,000 of rehab on every apartment here with the people living here, and that everybody's lived to tell the tale. And I think that, while many people deserve credit for that, there's one person more than any who really deserves recognition for that today, and that's Amy Johnston, who for 3 years, yes, you should clap for her. I mean, from the paper, when this was all on paper and not even real, right through being out on site and making sure everything's okay. It's incredible. I feel we got every nickel of our rehab dollar. We got the best quality we could get for our money, and it's really a credit to her and the rehab team. The other thing that amazes people, and also that makes them feel discouraged, is they say the reason you could do Northgate is your community supported you. And I think that is a unique thing about Burlington that we start to take for granted. But the reason that Northgate worked is that the people of Burlington said, we're not going to let it happen. We're not going to let those people be homeless. We're not going to allow the displacement to happen. Right from the very first, when Mayor Sanders and Alan Geer went to the voters and said we need a condo conversion ordinance to protect the residents at Northgate, and people voted for it. And right through our efforts, where many, many volunteers came forward and served on the Save Northgate Task Force, the Northgate nonprofit, the steering committee, and then there's many people out there who sent us donations who've never maybe seen this. And so I'm inviting everybody in Burlington to come to our open house. We want to celebrate with the community and let them see that Northgate is a new place, and one that's very, very proud of where it got. Thanks a lot. And I'd like to introduce now one of Northgate's friends in high places, and believe me, you can't have enough of them when you're trying to raise $21 million. That's Francis Gross Lewis from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Good morning. There should be a lot of smiles out there this morning. This is a proud day. When I came up here the first time in 1987, I attended several meetings in City Hall, and they talked about this project. And on the ride home, a couple of the staff members that were with me said, do you think it'll work? And I told them that I really didn't know if it would work or not, because it was a massive mountain to climb. In 1988, we had our first meeting in the Manchester HUD office. And a staff member came in and said, the people from Northgate are in the conference room. And I walked in, and sitting across the table from me were Brenda Torpy, Elizabeth Mulligan Drake, Amy Johnston, Amy Wright, and I looked into their eyes, and when I looked into their eyes, I knew immediately that it would work. Because I've learned in my HUD career, you can lead a bureaucrat to the trough, but you can't make him drink. Now, I'll tell you what these ladies have done in 3 years. They led a lot of bureaucrats to the trough, and when they didn't drink, they held their head underwater until they drank. this is really a proud moment for me. I've been to 4 of these up here, I think. I came to the initial transfer of the deed in January of 1990, January 3rd, I believe it was. And I think I said at that time, if some of you who were there remember, I said I felt like I had been through a 37-month pregnancy. And we had suffered some setbacks, but on the night of December 31st, I believe, near midnight, I finally became what I consider to be a proud father. I had a project in Vermont that had done what they said they were going to do. And now that baby is 22 months old. And I'll tell you, it looks great to me. I think it looks fantastic. And it's due to the tenacity of a lot of people, many of whom are very, very nice, wonderful, tough ladies. I know they made me cower a few times. Of course, I'm clearly intimidated by ladies anyway. But they did what they had to do, and you can see the results. So I take great pride in coming here today and seeing the final result, being a part of this ceremony. We're working on another one now in Barrie. We've got a couple more in southern Vermont. This is a model for the entire country. I spent a lot of time in Washington this summer at training sessions. We're always training. I spent 7 out of 11 weeks of the summer in Washington, which is not all bad. And we found that continually the name Northgate kept coming up. Every time we talked about preservation, every time we talked about how do you do this? And my counterparts from other offices around the country, Nebraska, Colorado, Arizona, said, did you have anything to do with that one up in Vermont? And I was very, very proud to say I did. And we told them all about it. I have the tape that Brenda was kind enough to send me, the videotape. I think everybody in the world has seen that videotape, at least everybody that knows me. So I take pride in being here today. I congratulate everybody that had something to do with it. As I said, I only have one more trip to make up here. I was here for the transfer of the deed. I was here the day you started the rehabilitation. I'm here today, and on my next trip, I'll be filling out an application for the next vacancy. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Francis. Those are great comments. In fact, once we were at a meeting at HUD Washington, one of our last great meetings, trying to pull everything together, and I was saying to the man at HUD that we had a lot of support back home. He says, support back home? I was in LA the other day. I tripped over a wino, and he said, how's Northgate doing? So I guess we did have to get the word out there. Our next speaker is Kathy Kehoe from Housing Vermont. We were very, very lucky that when Elizabeth went on to greater things, that Kathy Kehoe replaced her there. She's been a tremendous help to us and will be in the management and the ongoing preserving what we've made here. So Kathy?
Housing Vermont would like to congratulate NHI and especially Amy Johnston for getting every possible dollar and cent out of the rehab budget.
We are cheap.
Earlier this week, Mary Parent, who pays the bills on the rehab budget out here each month, came up to me and said, you know, Amy told me that they have $15,000 more to spend. And I said, where'd she get the extra $15,000? And she said, we sold the old appliances out there. And if anyone knows what shape these appliances were in, I would recommend that you don't get involved in a horse trade with Amy, because you'll come out on the short end.
Don't put that on the air, okay?
Housing Vermont serves 2 major roles out here. One is a long-term role. We're the general partner along with NHI for the next 21 years. And during that time, we will work together to maintain the quality of living environment that you see here today. The second role that Housing Vermont played was during the acquisition. We are what's called a syndicator, and that means we went out and persuaded somebody to put in equity investment into this project. In layman's terms, that's a down payment on the property, and that's no easy feat when that number is over $3.4 million. We found one source in the name of Fannie Mae, who you may have heard of, but we found the other source right in our own backyard, and that was through the Bank of Vermont. And with that, I'd like to introduce the president of Bank of Vermont, John Ewing, who is now also part of the partnership of Northgate.
Thank you very much, Kathy. My first introduction to how complex this project was going to be was, I think, when I went to the closing, which was just before the end of 1989. We had to have all the documents signed just before the end of the year, so Elizabeth and many others worked like crazy. And I walked into the closing room in Housing, Vermont, and they had many, many tables all around the wall, and there were at least 200, maybe 300 documents, all of which had to be signed, and accompanied by about 20 lawyers, I think. And it was a pretty good hint in terms of how complex this project was going to be. Turned out to be, of course, extremely successful. And to make success out of that kind of complexity took tremendous management. You've already heard about that. Took tremendous participation from everybody, from the tenants to Wright and Morrissey and everybody else. Bank of Vermont is certainly proud to be a part of it, and we wish the project the very best of success in the future. Thank you.
Well, it sounds like somehow the cat slipped out of the bag. I guess it was Francis. So you all know that the women of Northgate are really just a bunch of housing terrorists. And I'd like to introduce the next person who's one of the leaders of the SWAT team, is Anne-Marie Dennis, a resident here at Northgate and now the president of Northgate Housing, Inc.
I don't know about a terrorist, but I know that when it came to saving our homes, I wasn't going to give up any fight, and I wasn't going to listen to any no. But neither were all the other residents that were with me on it, that came to all those meetings, that attended and made sure that people listened to us. And it's very heartwarming to see all of the organizations that were willing to cooperate with the tenants and were willing to make a deal like this work. The residents stuck through it and kept making sure that people kept coming to the table, but it wouldn't have worked unless everyone else was willing to come to the table. So we made it work, and now, along with the physical new facelift that we've got out here, the residents also have a new emotional facelift. They feel a lot of pride in not just how it looks, but in what we've accomplished, and we would like to thank everyone for being there with us. Next speaker will be Alan Hunt, who is the director of Vermont Housing and Finance. And we tried to terrorize him a few times, but he wouldn't listen to that.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. My comments will be brief. I've learned not to stand in the way of food after numerous speakers. But we're pleased to be the primary lender on this project. We've invested over almost $10 million for a period of 30 years, so it will certainly be very interesting to see how this project develops over the 30 years as our financial interest is very strong. I also wanted to comment that this project, and Francis touched on this, has really helped our efforts with the other three projects, Barry at Highgate Apartments. I think they learned a lot from the folks here about how to do it. They use some of the same team members, and that project is nearly done and will be equally as successful, I'm sure. We're now working in the Brattleboro area at Westgate Apartments, and as Francis said, we'll be over in Bennington in another year or so. So we're hoping that the rudiments of the team will remain together, and we'll have same degree of success there as you have here. So we congratulate you. Pleased to have played a role, and thank you for your diligence in working with us.
I don't want to go into a lot of details about what the renovations here included. Most of it you can see: siding, windows, doors, roofing. There was a lot of site grading, new fences. There's also a lot of interior work and a heating conversion. This is a new building behind you for the maintenance folks, and we've renovated this community building, which you'll see in a few moments. But my point is that all this work required a total of approximately 11,500 days of access into individual apartments, 11,500 of them. So that is a lot for the residents of Northgate to have lived through and rallied behind. And one of our greatest advocates among the residents is Donna Russell, who is the president of Northgate Resident Association. So I'd like to ask her to come forward and say our last words, and then we'll be doing a ribbon cutting shortly after that.
In trying to think what to say this morning, the only thing that would come to mind was a little poem. For those of you that have come for a view, today marks the end of renovation. But for those of us who have lived through it for 2 years, today is a day of liberation. Looking back over the last 2 years, it hasn't been easy by any means. As Amy said, this was a renovation project where the residents remained in their homes while all of the work was being done. That work has been extensive. As she said, you can see what's been done on the outside. Those of us who live in the apartments have seen what's been done on the inside, and what has taken place inside the units is also a major transformation. If I were to share with you back before rehab, if you had come to my apartment and sat down in the living room during the winter, you would have been enjoying a nice cool breeze from the winter breezes coming in through the windows in the door. If you wanted to go out my back door, we could have chiseled the ice off the floor so we could open the drapes for you. Now if you come, the buildings are insulated, the apartments are warm, our heating bills have been drastically reduced. And all of this has taken a great deal of work and effort, both on the part of all of the agencies, the officials, the rehab teams, the coordinators, and the residents working together. In a lot of housing issues, people seem to be fighting City Hall or fighting the federal or local officials. With Northgate, it was everyone finding themselves, much to our delight, on the same side of the issues, all working together to preserve housing, to keep it affordable, and to make sure that people would not be displaced from their homes. Besides the physical renovation that's taken place, there's also been a rehabilitation of attitudes here. Residents now feel more secure. We have a pride in where we live. Nobody has to mumble, "I live at Northgate" anymore. We shout it with pride. We live at Northgate. Come out and see what we've done. This is no longer just a low-income housing project. It's a housing project where anyone of any income would be proud to say that they were a resident. And as a resident, I would just like to say thank you to the HUD officials. Thank you to Vermont Housing. Thank you to the other federal and state agencies, to the mayor for the support we've had from the city of Burlington. And especially thank you to Brenda, who did a lot of the legwork and the fundraising, and to Amy Johnston, who helped to pull all of this together and basically to give us new homes without having to move. I just want to say thank you.
Excuse me, I made a major gaffe, and I apologize to you guys. I left Gus out of my lineup here. I'd like to introduce Gus Seelig from the Vermont Housing Conservation Board. Not only was known as the trust fund, not only did they give us a lot of money and were very helpful and generous, but they were the kind of people that at the 11th hour when we were trying to get our numbers to work and we needed help, we needed that last bit of money, they came through for us. So we thank them in particular for all their flexibility and support they've shown us along the way. Gus?
Thanks very much. This project has gone on so long that several people, including our congressman and mayor, have changed jobs since the time that people first started to plan the redevelopment
of this community, and you've all done a tremendous job to stick with it so long. Not only is this a model to get some of the other gates done around Vermont, as they're called, but the principles that the city has really been pushing forward for the last decade, and that of resident involvement, of no more absentee ownership, of preserving affordable housing, are principles that we're applying statewide to all kinds of housing projects. And it's because of the effort here that that model is moving forward, that the state decided to create a Housing and Conservation Trust Fund, and that we were able to provide $3 million to this project. So the model is not just one for federal projects, it's the principles behind what you've done that really are seeding a lot of good affordable housing all over the state of Vermont. One of the powerful women that hasn't been an integral part of the Northgate team but helped us get money is your own Representative Carmel Babcock, who got us an extra $1 million the first year that essentially went here. And not only did she get turned on about this project, but as the chair of the Joint Housing Committee, she's now fighting for affordable housing across the state, involving mobile home park residents, helping to protect lots of people. So your example here goes well beyond dollars. It goes well beyond other gate projects and HUD projects. It really expands geometrically in terms of the impact you've had. This is the third celebration, in addition to coming to see the project when it was under construction with my board, that I've been to. The ribbon cutting and the groundbreaking and the closing have all been great. But the most important celebrations are the ones that you're going to have in the way of birthdays and anniversaries and graduations, and making this decent housing for those kinds of events and those kinds of celebrations is what we've all been working toward, and congratulations, you did a great job to get here.
A couple of weeks ago I heard a great quote that I thought was really fitting for Northgate. And it was George Bernard Shaw who said that reasonable people know that they have to change themselves to fit in with the world around them, whereas unreasonable people believe that they can change the world around them to fit into their needs. And he went on to say, therefore, if it weren't for unreasonable people, there'd be no progress in the world. So along with that line of thinking, I think that everyone associated with Northgate, and our speakers in particular, are some of the most unreasonable people I know because they really drove this thing to be possible. So I'd like to ask all the speakers to come and join me to cut the ribbon, and following that you can go into this building. If a door is locked, it's because we haven't got the final inspection on it. Please don't go in. And there'll be refreshments upstairs in the community hall. Thank you, everybody. Has everyone got one?